Shall we begin? Welcome everybody who's joined us, and thank you so much for coming along to this. My name is Jonathan Burrows, and I'm a choreographer and an associate professor at the Centre for Dance Research, Coventry University. This is the fourth in a series of talks called DaRE Invites, which is curated by myself and my colleague Kerry Frankson. And the overarching theme this year for the series of talks has been the body and time. And we've been looking at time from quite wildly different perspectives. And today we've invited Yves Citton and Bojana Cvejić to think together about what I described as modes of attention. Even Bojana may frame this slightly differently. Thank you both for agreeing to be in conversation. How the talk works is that even Bojana will speak for around an hour, and then we'll open up to any questions, observations, critiques, and so forth from anybody present listening. And just to say that you can ask your questions live and direct. If you speak, you'll just pop up, or you can put them in the chat, and we will monitor the chat throughout the conversation. If you want to ask a conversation or make an observation in the chat during the time when Yves and Bojana are speaking, please do that. I'll keep an eye on it. And if there's something, if I'm able, I might bring that question into the conversation. So can I just start by asking each of you, Yves and Bojana, to just briefly introduce yourself and a little bit in short, like what your background is and what your area of interest, practice, research is at the moment. Yves, would you like to begin?
Sure. So thank you very much for the invitation. I look forward to the conversation. My name is Yves Citton. I'm currently a professor of literature and media at the University of Paris 8 in the north of Paris, in the poorest department in France. I come from Switzerland. I'm not even French. I taught in the United States, always literature in Pittsburgh, PA. And for about 20 years now, I've been interested in issues of attention. I wrote a few articles, books. One of them is called The Ecology of Attention. And now I'm moving towards issues of curiosity, which are linked to that, but slightly different. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk about it. And so I'm not a psychologist. I'm not really a philosopher. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not anything. I'm proud of defending literature as a specialization in everything and anything. Which is that we in literature, I think, are well placed to deal with ignorance. I think literature is all about making ourselves aware of our own and of other people's ignorance. And so I've been dealing and writing about literature, and not from a position of authority, but more raising questions on it. And that's the position I'd like to.
Someone who's joined us should maybe sign. Should I introduce myself?
Yes, please. Yeah.
My name is Bojana Cvejić. I'm originally from Yugoslavia, but based in Brussels and navigating work and life between Brussels and Oslo, where I'm currently professor of dance theory at Oslo National Academy of the Arts. And my background is in musicology and philosophy. But my, let's say, bread and butter comes from dramaturgy. I'm a practicing dramaturge, having worked with many choreographers and I always say I'm the person that spends a lot of time listening to other artists and articulating their problems with them. My current research is in collective methodologies in experimental performing arts and activism in the current, well, difficult political moment and fascism. And I'm also accompanying Jonathan Burrows in the research Rethinking Choreography, where we are gauging the consequences of motor learning, motor cognition as a way of perceiving, inhabiting, being, anticipating world, which one could maybe even summarize in the shortest way as everyone who dances is choreographing, and that also requires a reconceptualization of choreography against the divide between dance and choreography that we are accustomed to in our scene, in our field. And I'm speaking from Brussels at this moment. That's maybe enough from me. I'm very excited about this opportunity to talk with Yves. So Yves, thank you for making time for us, and Jonathan for the invitation, and DaRE for organizing the series of talks.
Bojana, would you like to begin? I know you have some questions and observations that you shared with me earlier this morning. Can I hand over to you to begin the conversation?
So let's say that the pretext for our conversation today is the book, The Ecology of Attention, that in its original French edition appeared already 13 years ago in 2014, pour une écologie d'attention, and was relatively fast translated into English in 2017. And has reached a wide readership and has also attracted many dance scholars, perhaps not in England and in Belgium, as far as I know. But we met at a conference in Lisbon a year ago, where your book served as a kind of framework on attentional studies. And the book itself is highly important in the sense that it marks a turning point, I believe, in attention studies, away from, let's say, capitalist conception of attention as a resource which is in scarcity. We speak of attention in mercantile terms often. We take it to be something transactional. We give and take, and we pay attention. But you have taken a leftist, anti-capitalist stance, to put it most harshly, perhaps, for an ecology or maybe even ecosophy of attention. And I wanted to insist on you presenting that horizon of ecology of attention, because this talk might serve for many people to discover your book for the first time. I'm sure that among our participants, there are many who have read it, but I think we would do well to speak first about ecology of attention. As I read it, what is important is that what is important about the claim is that it situates attention in relational environment, and that the relations are constitutive, they're condition for attention, even when we refer to it in individual terms, even if we think that attention is something that is particular, defines us, we learn how to navigate it or to deal with it in this moments of overabundance of information, how also to guard attention against consumerism and so forth. But prior literature to this book hasn't paid enough attention to the environmental perspective. So also, because we are talking now, I think it's important to say that in your book, in the very introduction, you also emphasize this different writing of ecology or ecosophy, CH, where echos points to resonances of relations. So could you perhaps lay out some of the ideas underpinning this claim of this book that is somewhat hopeful? The book is a study, but it's also somehow an ethical appeal to us to become better at collectively working on our attention.
Thank you very much for praising this book. I'm very flattered and very moved by what you're saying about it. I understand that we're going to exchange questions, right, Bojana? So I read a paper of yours which I loved, and I have tons of questions. And I understand that we have 1 hour for our little two-on-two conversation. So maybe if it's okay with Jonathan and with you, I will try to answer what you're saying and then bounce back on a question on your piece, because I think maybe that could be interesting. Is that okay with you?
That's great. Thank you, Yves.
Okay, great. So yes, what I tried to do with this early research of mine on attention was to move, as you said, from the economic paradigm, which I think is very, very important. So it's not saying we shouldn't think about it. I think it's very crucial. It is crucial for me because for the second reason that you said, to talk about environment, we shouldn't just think of attention as my problem, as a subject, my attention invested in this or that. So the first claim was to say, yeah, we have to think about it in terms of environment, our attention, and what stimulates, tries to capture, numbs, etc., or my attention. And for me, that was a line of work that continued later on in another book, which I see as the other part of the same question, which it's a book that was called Mediarchy, and which was about media. And to me, to study attention, whether it's individual attention, collective attention, joint attention, etc., without studying the environment that in a way conditions it. And this environment is obviously the sun, it's obviously people smiling or not smiling, but it's also, now I just saw Bojana smiling because there's a whole network of electricity production, of cable, wires, etc., satellites, I don't know what. So we cannot understand attention without understanding the media, not in the sense of just television and social media, but mediation, infrastructural, technological mediation, which themselves have their economy. So all of this is very, very important. The economy, I think, is central in all this. And of course, criticizing and fighting against capitalism insofar as it structures now this media infrastructure around commercial advertisement, which leads then to ideological problems. I think this is crucial. So that was the first move, which was to think in terms of environment and not in terms of consumer or in terms of free will deciding what I am going to pay attention to today. I don't think we're ever in that situation, even if some of us are more privileged and can think, oh, am I going to read a book or am I going to take a walk? I think already this type of question is very much a privileged question in a world where exploitation is pressurizing more and more people or more and more ourselves also. So moving from economy to ecology is to de-individualize the approach, because as we know, classical liberal economics are based on individual choices. So then the other move, I think, is towards ecology is to talk not about profit, because that's what capitalist economy is all about, but about sustainability. And ecology, for me, it's also raising questions of sustainability. So how can we build or transform our media or personal relational environments to make them sustainable and to make them desirable for other desires than profit accumulation? So that would be the main frame. Now, when we think about environment in ecology, and that's where I'm going to turn to your paper. A lot of the second part of your paper thinks about attention being, and I think it's a quote from Tim Ingold, engagement in perception. So that's quite obvious. Usually we think of attention as paying attention as focusing our perceptive capacities on this rather than on that, okay? Then you say perception, movement, and that's where the dance comes around in a lot of your paper, and maybe hopefully we'll have time to discuss this. It's to say, oh, we can't just think of sensing and perception without thinking that what senses and what perceives is always a body in movement, whether it's in a dance or just walking in the street or just me here moving my hands, etc. So we have to think of perception and movement, but we also have to think of perception, movement, and environment. So for me, this was the lesson of this. Now, a lot of your paper, I think, is very interesting in thinking of automation, of what moves are sort of automated in us. For instance, the way I'm moving my hands now, I'm not thinking about it. That's just because, I don't know, maybe I'm Italian origin or something. So I'm just, people in my side of the world raise their hands and move a lot. I'm not thinking about it. This is sort of automatic. It's my body moving my hands to do some gestures which I'm not really aware of. And you have, again, through Ingold, a reflection on this automation, which is not just a machine in us. It's not just an alienation, as we could think of automation in terms of mechanization, but part of it is skill. And I wanted to rebound the question because I thought this was very interesting, and this resonates with things I've been interested later on from my book. And so maybe we can rebound on that if you're okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't expect that you would immediately return a question, but let's do this ping pong. That's good. Yes, apart from your book, Tim Ingold's work on attention through reappraisal of motor skills in perception, in also an environmental sense, was important. Now, for many people listening in this conversation, I think that we are accustomed to mind-body dichotomy as the main problem of dance. But what we've learned from neuroscience and what anthropology has adopted from this neuroscientific paradigm is that, first of all, mind is only one part of the brain, and that's where the non-conscious and also automatic comes in. And second, mind-body image of what is going on when we are dancing excludes the environment, which is the third component, and that's very important in a kind of individuation, which is both individual and collective when we dance. What does that mean is that a skill is not just acquired through learning an object, but through a constitution of subjectivity in a situation. And this situation is populated by others. It's in a place that it has meaning, even spirit, if you want, and sociopolitical, economic, cultural conditions are also part of it. So for Jonathan and me, this phrase, educating attention, to describe how skill acquisition, motor skill acquisition occurs was very powerful because it presupposes learning by imitation. And I think we will take a moment to maybe unpack a little more this, because imitation is quite unpopular with the critique of representation in dance that we have, but it is something that happens in the transmission of dance. But second, to understand that the skill is not something that I possess as individual. The skill is assembled across movement, brain, and the environment. It's somehow interstitial. Without social aliveness, it doesn't exist. We underestimate how much it depends on the space and on others. In that sense, in environmental perspective, to action as perception was crucial from Ingold. I could say a lot more, but I want to maybe return the question to you. In the book, you distinguish 3 levels of attention. There are several modes, more than 3, obviously, but when we think of the mode of attention and scale, you go from collective attention to joint attention to individual attention. And I wanted to spend some time around joint attention, because this is something that concerns us in dance, because you could say that studio, but also theater, is this collective attentional ecosystem. We know a lot about what it means to share presence, how to coordinate perceptions and depend on perceptions on others. So this is what happens in studio. This is also what happens on stage with an audience. And perhaps we could speak a little more about it, about the practice and the training in dance, because there has been, let's say, a shift in pedagogy in dance from masterclass to workshop model. And the masterclass model is considered traditional, disciplinary, maybe sometimes even authoritarian, because it's about transmission from master to disciple. Apprenticeship is based on asymmetries, this difference. And in workshop, we've developed other methodologies that are more democratic in the sense that they presuppose invention in which everyone participates in the studio, and very often are depersonalized for the good and the bad. And that's where I want to maybe start a kind of slight polemic. On the one hand, we could say that joint attention presupposes time, and dancers know the best what it means to have patience. We have this predicament that to train in dance, you need 10,000 hours at least. So there is a kind of slow assembling of skills, honing skills. And of course, within that, there is also the ideal of a technique or of a body, and that's fraught with all kinds of political questions around training. So on the one hand, there is the authority of the master, and on the other hand, we could have a workshop where we are versatile and we quickly shift from one set of skills to another, but where technical training and excellence in that is no longer, let's say, the goal. And Jonathan and I, in our research, we have addressed many practitioners in a variety of dance forms, but we've noticed that in the classic, not necessarily European traditions, classic Indian dance or social dance, there's still the presence of the master as authority. That is not necessarily understood as a form of oppression. And the choreographer is very often endowed with this authority in a negative sense, the one who give orders, who might be even disembodied. What would you say about authority in the situation of this presential attention, joint attention in the studio, in a learning situation?
My goodness, there were so many things. I hope we have the whole afternoon, because it's
I'm sorry.
Where can I take that? Maybe I'm gonna keep your question for the end and go back a little bit. You mentioned that in the book I distinguish 3 levels, and I'm just going to both make that explicit and criticize it, because now I wouldn't say it this way. So it's an old book, and hopefully we keep changing. So in the book, what I said, which I think is still valid, which is that usually we think in attention in individual terms, and that's the way I have an experience of attention. I could now decide to look through the window, to look at you, etc. Joint attention means when we share a presence, and usually it's at the same time and in the same place. Here we are at the same time, but we're not in the same place. In Coventry, I'm in Paris, etc. So it's still joint attention, because I can see if you nod, if you start rolling your eyes, etc. Joint attention. Okay, it could be 2 people, it could be 10,000, or if you're in a stadium, I guess. A big stadium is how far it would go. But you need to share this form of presence and perceiving other people's reaction. Okay, and then I said, oh, you have collective attention. And collective attention would be typically what Gabriel Tarde, sociologist, explained in the 19th century with the development of daily newspapers. Everybody reads the morning newspapers at home. They don't feel each other. They don't know if the neighbor laughs or cries, but we're a public. So, all right, so this is collective attention, the media, and so forth. Now, I'd like to add at least 2 other layers. One, which I would call organizational attention, which is within an institution, within a workplace, within a bureaucracy. What is subordination in terms of work? It is somebody within an institution telling you this morning you're going to do that, or every day you're going to put that piece on that mechanical chain, and so forth. So organizational attention is crucial, and I didn't talk about it. But there's another one which I think is part of what we're discussing now in terms of environment, which goes back to good old Walter Benjamin, this famous article of Walter Benjamin on distraction and the work of art in the era of mechanical reproduction, etc. At the end of it, so rich that you can see so many things in it. But at the end of it, sort of, interestingly, he talks about, he doesn't use that word, but I would call it architectural attention. There's a form of attention to architecture, and it doesn't mean, oh, to look how the Parthenon is wonderful or how Gary's museums are fantastic. He means moving, I think he means, because it's very elusive. So my interpretation is that he means, in my house, I almost never hit my head on a door or on a wall. I know that here there's a door, here there's even at night, etc., etc. And yet I wouldn't say that I pay attention to the door. Usually we don't pay attention to doors. We can talk with people, be very much caught in an argument, and still most of the time we don't hit our head against windows or doors, etc. So this attention to the environment, but the very concrete environment of, you were talking about the studio, or the street, or the others in the street when I take a metro, or etc., etc. You can call it distraction, because I'm not focusing my attention on that, and that's his whole point, to say what is distraction with cinema, what is attention, etc. But it's absolutely crucial. And one of the index of that, and that comes in your article also, that's why I'm thinking of it, is the very notion of a habit. When we talk about automatization of movements, etc., etc., it's called a habit. And it works in German, it works in English, it works in French, that habit and habitat are very closely linked. Gewohnen, wohnen, etc. In German, that works the same. And I think it's not just a coincidence. It's never a coincidence, these linguistic things. So to habit a place, to inhabit a place, means to have sort of a constant underground level of attention to knowing where doors are. You could call it orientation, you could call it the way you want, presence of a body, presence of a cat, presence of a tree, etc., etc., which goes under the radar usually, but which is a condition for habiting, for orienting yourself in space. And I think for dance, again, I'm not a dancer, so I don't know anything about dance, but I assume that this is a very foundational dimension of attention in dance. This, again, maybe architectural is not the best way, but I think that's, to me, that's what he said. And so I'm going back to the studio, because I think your question was a studio, masterclass, etc. I'm not, that was just to frame it. What is a studio? The way I understand it, and again, I'm in literature, so I like to do connection with word, is the place to study. Studio, studiare, studiosus, etc., etc. What does it mean to study? So we have now, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Fred Moten and Stefano Harney, a wonderful book on the undercommons, on All Incomplete, where they define Black study in a very broad sense, which I think is very interesting. So I'm just saying, if you haven't heard of that, go to it because it's so good. But usually a traditional sense of study is, you can do it with different people, but you can also do it yourself by just opening a book and entering in dialogue with the writer. And in order to do that, you need a certain architecture. If bombs are falling all around, I guess you can, but it's much more difficult than if you are in a library, etc., etc. So this architectural attention, it's always there, even if we're not aware of it. It needs to be in a certain mode, since we're talking about mode of attention, of not being threatened, of not having to pay attention to noise, etc., etc. And the studio or the lab, in terms of science, would be a very strange place, isolated from usual stimuli that comes from the environment. And these are, so you can call it protected environment, you can call it asepticized environment, and then it becomes sick in a way. You could call it a room of our own, because it's exactly what it is, a room of your own. And the more it goes, the more I think this is very important to measure how much we depend. And I don't know who we is, but I would say at least people, like I assume most of you in the West, either raised in the West or raised in a certain tradition, again, where studying means something, etc., etc. And this is, in a way, a form of, it could look like something individualistic. When we say a room of her own, it's for a woman to be able to close the door and to write a few pages, to have 5 hours or 3 hours in front of you. And it's individualistic, whether it pleases us or not. We are all critics of individualization, I think, but we shouldn't. There's another philosopher whom I really like, Willem Flusser, and Willem Flusser opposes the public, which would be the stage for you, and the private, which would be precisely the studio. And he said, there's nothing interesting happening on stage if you don't have a moment of retreat within the studio. And the studio, so then the question about masterclass would be, I assume a masterclass happens in a studio space, where again, it's a very strange and very privileged environment where you don't have to pay attention to all kinds of other things that usually you have to pay attention to. You can focus, you can defocus, you can experiment with your attention, and there can be someone in that space, call him a master, call him a friend, call it whatever, who may do very interesting things that couldn't happen basically anywhere else. So for me, one question is the authority of the master, and this I don't want to address now. Maybe if you want to go back, we can, and I'm not sure I have something interesting to say. But what I'm interested in, the space of the studio, the space of retreat in something which Flusser would call private, which, and here I'm gonna finish this intervention, I'm sorry. I think it is part of the way we understand skill. That a skill is not just to function. It's not just to know how to do something properly in conformity with an institution that wants you in the factory to do that gesture to assemble a car, or in that bureaucracy to put that stamp so that the bureaucracy flows on. You can call it a skill if you want, but when we're in dance, etc., we think of something else. And I think a skill means some form of individuation, and this form of individuation skill, which then is has to happen, or has to develop in the studio, which then makes it possible to go on stage and show something, which is not just stamping something or doing what you have been programmed to do. So that would be what I would say on the studio side. I don't know if it rings if it makes sense to you.
It's brilliant. I return to what you said before, from habit to inhabiting. And I'm thinking how, because we talk a lot about habit in dance, and you could say that contemporary dance, and anyone who wants to be contemporary, is all the time reflecting and examining habits and trying to break them, right? But at the same time, I think we've learned to also appreciate continuity, and that the continuity always entails transformation and variation and invention, if you want. But I think that what's interesting, if we want to take this environmental line of thinking further, to think about dance as a space. There's a space for the dance, but dance is also that trans-individual space that we inhabit. And of course, when we inhabit, we also take care of it. And out of our care, we also regenerated, recreated, if you want. Also, very important point you've made, that skill is not about functioning in a kind of productivist paradigm, but it's this also aptitude to act in a moment, and you hone your skill to act from studio to the stage. You are freezing up a little bit for me, Yves. I don't know if other people...
I'm sorry, I'm having some difficulty. The flow is sort of interrupted, has been interrupted, so I missed a few words. Now I think now it's back on track. So I'm sorry, if you could just repeat this last sentence. Sorry.
The last thing I said is that it's important that you underline that we could approach skill differently from, let's say, the dominant hegemonic capitalistic sense of functionalism, and in being productive, from assembly line to, if you want, immaterial capitalism, where other skills are in use. But it is an aptitude to orient yourself in a situation. And there's the situation in the studio where you are practicing, honing skills, and then there's a moment of not really applying, but reenacting the skill, I would say, reenacting the skill on stage. And that's also another environment, right? Because then it's also about composing, organizing attention with others, and these others are not necessarily the peers with whom you share knowledge, but you share presence, and perhaps that's an introduction to my next question, because when we speak about attention in live performance, we often describe it or relegate it to dramaturgy. Dramaturgy of a live event could even be understood as a guidance of attention, of the temporality, how the time passes in experience, in perception, in cognition. As I'm a practicing dramaturg, I'm often sitting there as a so-called first spectator, even though I'm a complicit and I'm not there to represent an audience. But I'm there to record my experience and my understanding. And for me, the question of attention and attending came when I approach a performance not as something that is dual. There's an object, and then there's a live event, and there's the makers, and there's the audience, and there might be a misunderstanding between the two, or a kind of interval between the two, but that maybe there are three modes of temporality and attention. That we talk about making, creation, that happens in the studio as that privileged space, but that there's a reality of performing, which is the reality that performers have an access to. And then there's attending, and the attending is not only in the moment where we are the spectators of the performance. I also think that attention is a more interesting, broader notion than spectatorship, because spectatorship centralizes vision. But when we attend to performance, we are also part of it. We are part of also presential attention. Something is shared. It extends to us. And there's a kind of even afterlife, an echo. There are echoes of a performance. A performance continues to live in our imagination. Now, there's dramaturgy without dramaturgs, right? Since you come from literature, what is your take on dramaturgy? And what would you think about this relation between dramaturgy and attention?
Okay, maybe first I try to answer dramaturgy and attention, and then I want to go back to something which is presupposed in I think in a lot of the things you said, which I agree with, but then I'd like to question that and move beyond. And I think we still have a quarter of an hour, so I want to...
Yes, please.
So first, well, as a literature person, I hear choreography as a form of writing. So when we said earlier about the studio and a room of our own, it was a novelist who was talking about a room of her own. And because in the article you want, I think I understand. My understanding is that you want to redefine choreography in a different mode, not just a special moment where again you're in the studio and you write and then people execute what you told them to do. But it's much more back and forth. There is some form of choreography, maybe in improvisation, etc., etc. But still, I want to stress the fact that what I was saying earlier as the studio moment, to me, I see it as this moment of writing, écriture. And again, if we go back to Flusser, there's a lot of things about écriture. And to me, it's very relevant now to think about that in terms in the age of ChatGPT, in the age of Claude, in the age of all these things, who write for us. And what's happening when we have something that writes for us, that graphs for us? I guess it can graph choreography, like it can go graph other things. So that's one of the things I think we have to address in what's happening. What type of writing is involved? And how, more interestingly, how does that redefine what we used to call writing and what we may want to hold on to in terms of writing? And to me, this is very much a question of studio, etc. So dramaturgy is a way of also to respond dramaturgy, because in dramaturgy you have the demiurge, the creator of drama. And there's a work of creating a drama, just like there's a writing of dance movements in choreography. So for me, I would still stress that moment of writing and creation. Then I really like the three modes that you decided. So I guess what I said now is in the part of making, which can be hierarchized with a choreographer and dancer, which can be a collective, which can be all kind of things making, but still in the studio, I think. Then performing, which would be what happens on stage, and attending, where I hear what, because I was thinking of Jacques Rancière earlier when you talked about master, and the ignorant master in Jacques Rancière, you can see it as a sort of anarchist, whatever, mythology. But as a matter of fact, there is a master, and there is a need for a master in Jacques Otto's classroom and in Jacques Rancière's thing, and which I think that's where you're going. So I think that rings a very important bell to me. Now, same thing with attending. When Rancière adapts the ignorant schoolmaster to the performance, he said, well, action, you don't have just to activate the audience so that they come on stage and start dancing. It dances in their head. Just looking at you dance, they dance in their head and they choreograph in their heads. And that's exactly what attending a dance show is that you move in a way, you are moved and you move with what moves are in the audience, and you move, you're active, you attend, etc. So all of this, I think it's great. Now, my step back, and I'm going to try not to speak about this curiosity madness that I have now. I'm interested in curiosity more than attention. And maybe we'll have time. Are you aware that there's a new book that came out in January 26, called Attensity by the Friends of Attention? Is it something you've heard about or not?
No.
Oh, I should tell you about it, because this is crucial. This is the next decade of attention studies is there. So maybe I'll if you have time, I can show you the book.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So remind me of intensity. Now, just to go back to this. So you said reenacting the skill on stage in sharing presence. You said guidance of attention in what's happening. You said attending. I agree with all this. Cool. Now, I have a problem with that, which is that we tend to think of attention as something is present and I see it or I don't see it, I hear it, I touch it, etc. But it presupposes the presence of something or someone and etc. etc. Attention, I think, presupposes the presence of something. Now, why am I interested in curiosity? Because in a way, 90% of what you say about attention, you can just say the same thing about curiosity. He's paying attention to that, he's curious about that, etc. etc. But in the structure of curiosity, you are curious for something that's not already given. If it was there, and if you could see it, if you can just attend to it because it is present, that's an oversimplification, but it doesn't go exactly in how we think of curiosity. So curiosity, the way I understand it, would mean you have sort of and this I could qualify it, but let's say it's as simple as that. You have sort of an inner drive. St. Augustine would be libido sciendi. You have a libido, it's a drive in psychoanalytic term, if you want, to find out something, to know something, to touch something, to see something, whatever, which is not present to your senses. And the fact that curiosity means you go out of where you are, of your habits, of your knowledge, of whatever you want, to find some, not just something that's hidden, but some form of alien curiosity, real curiosity, intense curiosity. It's not just another thing in the series. Oh, it can be a lot of it when it's commercialized. It's just, oh, you want to have, when I was a kid, they used to sell, maybe it's still the case, cards of football players, soccer players, football players. And you needed to have the whole team. So you would trade with your colleagues. I guess it still exists, this thing. So here, you know what I don't know if it's curiosity. You need that card of that player because it's missing there. To me, that's not exactly how I want to think of curiosity because I know what's missing. So curiosity is something alien, something, and that's where I may go back to intensity later on. I think the way we use the word attention and the way we talk about attention nowadays, partly due to people like me who wrote books 15 years ago on defending certain things and opposing certain things, I think we got trapped in a way, subordinating issues of perception, attention, thinking, etc., to the given presence of something. And it's very important to be attentive to the given, to attend to the show, etc. I'm not saying throw it away. I'm saying there's something else. By paying so much attention to this, I think we forgot something that's, to me, almost as interesting and as important, which I would call curiosity. I don't know if it makes sense.
It does. I want to, before I respond to that, I return to the point about writing, because writing can be easily misunderstood or can make choreography be understood as a kind of second order activity. First comes dance as spontaneous expression, and then choreography that shapes, fixes, sets, and is then repeatable and so on. And this is something that Jonathan and I try to debunk. And if we can take writing to be also the pathways that happen between the body. So if a sensory motor mechanism is the habit, it's automated, it's in my body in relation to an environment, then yes, we can still call it writing. But if writing is more écriture in the, let's say, tradition of auteur practices in the arts, then I think it's a more narrow definition, and I think we are looking for something more generic in a positive sense that would be a matter, of course, for any dancing. I just wanted to make that that distinction. I think it's very important what you say about somehow dissociating attention from only that which is present, because we are also then kind of bogged down into talking about, is attention good or not, around the presence, and it's almost about fixing also attention. And I think that what I understand your shift towards curiosity as that which is alien, which is not present. And in, I would say, in the vocabulary of dramaturgy and in, let's say, artistic poetics, this is very often addressed through imagination. Something is present that stimulates me to think about something that is not present. Now, I think, I don't know if many people who are there, I see some makers there, would agree that the most rewarding response they get from a performance is that it made people do something, think something else. That's the afterlife of the performance. Nowadays, too often, the spectacle ends and people applaud by cheering to the presence, to the moment, to the event. They take pictures, and I think it's forgotten. This moment of celebrating our shared presence. It's not unimportant, but it shouldn't stop there. And I think that why a lot of choreographers move to museums and exhibition as the apparatus for presentation is also because they wanted to have a sustained relation with audience, and that the visitors actually have another agency. They're not just receivers, but they also work with us. That would be my response to you. But I see curiosity looming as a new horizon of attentional studies, and I think it's also so vitally important for pedagogy in general. I don't know if you want to comment that. If not, I have also one last question. I don't know about the time, Jonathan. We have maybe 5 minutes left, but this question will be a little out of the context that we just established. What do you think, Yves? Do you want to respond to continue this line of thinking, or do you allow me another question that is a little bit from the hip?
I'll try to be short for once, and then we'll have the other people who can.
Okay. No, you should take all the time because you are the speaker we are here for. The last question has to do with something that you briefly deal with in your book, and that is ADHD, and you also criticize medicalization of these processes. But now we're 14 years later. And institutions such as study programs have recognized neurodiversity and neurodivergence. It's institutionalized, it's established, it entails people with special needs. Now, what is your take on the relationship between the individual and the diagnosis? And what does the diagnosis enable, and what does it hinder?
Well, thank you. I'll try to be brief on this one. We wrote with a few colleagues from Chile, Brazil. We wrote, they did, because I'm not a social scientist, so they did a lot of field study in Brazil, in Chile, and then in France to compare the attitudes in school toward ADHD, and to compare to what had been happening a few years earlier in the US. So it's a very complex story. We can't just talk about it like this. Oh, I think ADHD, etc., etc. There are a lot of practical consequences. There are a lot of complex things in neurosciences, etc., etc. So I'm not a person to say, oh, you should never take a Ritalin because whatever, it's all fake. And no, it's very complex. Some people may need to take something because there are neurosciences show certain things. A lot of the time, however, I think precisely an ecological approach is important. And in that book we did together, we had a specialist in didactics and pedagogy analyzing a classroom from the point of view of the ecology of attention in a classroom. And usually you think, oh, it is the pupil who is paying attention to the teacher, which is exactly what we want. Now, if I had time to talk about intensity, I would talk about that. But he says, oh, obviously the teacher pays attention to the pupil, even if it's not personally the class, and etc. But then what about the attention of the guy who runs the school to the teacher? And the attention of the minister to the guy who runs the school, to the teacher, and the parents, and the complexity of all this. And then you understand that, yes, there are cases where taking some form of medication will help. Now, it may help in helping certain flows in the brain to function differently, and that may be a good thing. I don't know, I'm not in neurosciences. Often, the way it helps is just to conform pupils to not just the ecology of attention, of who pays attention to whom, but to social roles of an overcrowded classroom with 35 people where there should be maximum 15. So because you can't pay for 15, you have 35, and in the 35, you need the 35 just to stay put. Better they sleep than they're curious. And so this crosses with the question of curiosity, because there are a lot of analysis. Susan Engel wrote a fantastic book in showing at the different stages from very early on, what is curiosity, what looks like curiosity in children, and what happens when they go to school, which school is a gigantic machine to numb curiosity. We don't want you to be curious. We say we want curiosity. We don't want you to be curious. We want you to absorb some form of messages and to say these messages. And maybe there's good reason for that. I mean, that's called socialization. It's a form of alienation. I don't mind. But the way curiosity is numbed by this, it's pretty much, it's a social thing. So for ADHD, I think the main problem for me is this individualization of the problem. It's the kid's problem, and it's the kid's brain problem. And so we're going to put something that's going to alter the brain and that's going to conform. And again, sometimes it's needed in the conditions where you have 30 kids, they can't all run around. So again, it's very, very complex. But I think it's a very good case to both think concretely about an attention ecology, and then neurodiversity, because you mentioned that also. I think this is why the topic is very complex, because you can't say, oh, it's all a hoax. It's the pharmaceutical companies who want to sell Ritalin and make millions. It's true, they make millions with Ritalin or the same. Yet some people who are curious are treated as being as having a deficit, because it's a deficit in attention, and they're treated for having a deficit disorder, whereas it's not a deficit at all. It's just another form. It's a diverse form of attention, of curiosity, or it may be, etc., etc. So it crosses all kinds of things, so that one judgment is not possible. I think you really have to bring so many different perspectives and lenses to see that. Now, I see it's 1 o'clock. I don't know if I can just have 5 more minutes to tell you about intensity very, very briefly.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So I don't have the book now. I don't want to waste your time, but there's a book called Intensity. It's the author. It's a collective author. They're called the Friends of Attention. So the author is the Friends of Attention. The title of the book is Attensity, A-T-T-E-N-S-I-T-Y, with an exclamation point. And the subtitle is a Manifesto for the Movement of Liberation of Attention. A Manifesto for the Movement of Liberation of Attention. And very briefly, it says 3 things. The first thing is that we all know we have an attention problem. Not the only factor, but one very important factor in this attention problem is what I would call the media in mediarchy. Here they focus on platforms. So capitalist platforms, platform capitalism, social network, etc. How is it paid for? What's the role of commercial? How it is made to extract attention? They bring a new metaphor, which is not attention extractivism, which I was used to, which I think we all understand. They talk about attention fracking. And fracking, I think, is much more interesting, because we used to think, well, when you think about extraction, you think, oh, we're all attentive. Attention is just like oil. Oil, just you drill a hole and oil comes up. That's the mythology of the West. Same thing with us. We pay attention, and they're capturing our attention to look at this rather than look at that. No, fracking means you have just to destroy the place. You have to break the mountain in order to get a few drops. So, and the same thing is happening. So first thing, it's this metaphor. Second thing, they say we have to bring coalition to make attention a central political issue, not just for dancers, not just for museums, not just for artists. The Friends of Attention started as artists, and they're still artists, but they were artists in a biennale and academic people in Sao Paulo when Bolsonaro was elected, and they thought we can't just go to biennale and go to museums. We have to do something political. So it's a political movement for attention, meaning coalition. And the model here is Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, saying something happened with pollution, environmental problem, and one book helped to coalesce something, and they're hoping that Attensity will do the same. But the most interesting thing is the third aspect, and that's why I want to bring it here. Attensity, it's a word that exists in very strange philosophy of attention in early Germany and the United States, or England, I forgot, in the early 20th century. And they take that word to distinguish it from attention as it is used. And I'm doing the same thing with curiosity. They're doing the same thing with, not the same, but they're doing a similar move with attensity. Curiosity, attensity, I try to link it, but now, how do they explain that? They say, if you look now at what people say about our attentional crisis, you bring questions about screens, you observe that kids in your class, they want to look at their screen, they don't want to look at you, and they're distracted, and it's sort of a general distraction. And so people argue about this. They say most people who argue, they can be from the right, from the left, from above, from below. They share one thing, which is one very narrow definition of attention as concentration. So you are attentive if you focus in a stable manner your whole attention on the teacher. And that is the model for good attention. And that's prevalent in most of the time. Again, something is here, there's a presence. You don't just daydream, there's a presence, a teacher is doing something, and so this are already criticized in the book, that because there's authority behind that, but they bring it further. So they say there are 5 characteristics of the situation where we talk about a good attention, and usually attention is always good. First, that's what I said, you concentrate your perception on one thing. Second, this concentration isolates you from the others. When you're in school, and actually the example, I'm just sorry, I missed a step. They say the model of attention, the best model of attention is in the 1960s in the US Army. Some guys were put in front of radar screens, and their task was to see the first nuclear missile coming from the USSR to destroy the United States. So you had people there in front of a screen, and they had to be as concentrated as possible, as focused as possible, to see that something that would maybe suggest that a nuclear attack is happening. And we understand that there are cases where you have to be fully concentrated on something. And, sorry, another digression, but I'll finish later. Graham Burnett, who is the sort of one of the authors there, has spent the last 15 years going into the archives of the sciences of attention. And the sciences of attention, from 1850s Germany to nowadays in neurosciences, he says, precisely. It was paid by militaro-industrial complex. It was made to measure attention, to quantify attention, and it brings this very narrow definition of attention, which has 5 features. So first, you're fully concentrated and fixed. Second, you're isolated from your body. Third, you are fully focused on a task, which, so it's not just being focused on something, it's focused within the framework of a task, of something to accomplish, of seeing that missile. Fourth, that task is not decided by yourself. It is the general who told the colonel that you should watch that missile, or it is the minister who told the head of the school who told the teacher that this has to be studied today. And final thing, it's in a competitive environment. You want your kid to have a better grade than the neighbor. You don't want the Russians to win the war. You want, etc. So if you think of these 5 features, this is the way science has implicitly defined attention for us. And whether we criticize screen and we think kids should be not distracted, whatever we say about attention, we tend to be caught in this. And attensity is whatever takes us out of one of these 5 features. It's collective. It's not task-oriented. The task has been decided by you, not by somebody up there. It's not competitive. You're distracted, etc. So this is attensity. All these millions of other forms of attention that are reduced to this by this debate. And then I'm stopping. One, the book, if you look at the book, it has sort of a flower shape, and this shape on the cover. And this shape is what they call attensity. It's another word for centripetal distraction. So healthier attention is that you're constantly distracted, but it's a way to go back to it's not to focus, to be fixed on the teacher. Is with one ear you listen to the teacher, and then you daydream and you think of other things, and then you come back. And I think for dancers, it must be very. Sorry, I'm stopping my promo for attensity.
No, sorry. Thank you so much. We let now people ask questions. I don't know, Jonathan, if you've collected questions in the chat or.
Yes, okay. There's a question come through from Zrinka Ushnek. Thank you very much for all your thoughts and for the conversation, Bojana and Yves. I was thinking about the dancer as choreographer attention as a first order activity and wondering whether it might be understood as a way of practicing and honing split attention. By split attention, I mean the process of engaging with multiple tasks, stimuli, senses, or sources of information simultaneously, inhabiting the roles of doing, observing, and reflecting within the same space of dance. Is that something you would or could relate to? Beautiful question.
And I don't know who invented that question, but that's attensity. You reinvented attensity. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. Multiple tasks at the same time. Split attention, meaning that, again, and that's what they're saying, and actually they're taking it from William James. William James clearly says, and that's one of the sources for all the discourse on attention, etc., that it's totally unnatural, inhuman, just to want people to be focused on one thing. So again, just like the studio is a strange place because you're isolated from the outside, and it can lead to the most crazy form of ideas or experiment or whatever. But on the other hand, so it is an exceptional place, and you may need it. So same thing, you may need to be fully focused, but to say this is attention, no. Attention is always pluralist. It's always multiple tasks that you have to deal with, multiple chronologies. We didn't talk enough about time, but I mean, for me, the question, if unfolded, it goes to what I was trying to allude to with attensity. I don't know if the person agrees.
I don't know if Zrinka wants to come into the talk, or I totally subscribe to this, what you're describing, Zrinka.
Yes, if you want to come directly into the talk, just unmute your video and microphone, and you can speak directly. Or and you can do that to ask a question, or if you'd like to just continue to post questions or observations, and I'll share them as they come through. But Zrinka, do respond if you want to.
No, just to say thank you. Yes, because I think this is just another way of vocabulary, a different way of how I would relate to what you spoke of from the experience of being the person doing this. Yeah, no, it resonates very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, observations, questions, critiques, objections, agreements? Chantal Ehrenberg.
Hello, thank you so much. This was really stimulating conversation, and I come to this primarily from dance studies and dancing and dance education, not from philosophy per se, but I do love philosophy and I read a lot of philosophy, and I have published a book trying to argument some of these, and one of the people reviewing also led me to meditation also as a skill, because I'm trying to argue about how contemporary dance, I think its particular focus on kinesthetic attention as a skill, because when dancers relate, I found with video images, their kinesthetic attention was very rich, and I think it's very specific, and Bojana's work is very important to me in that regard too, as well as people working in conceptual dance or other forms like Xavier Le Roy and Jerome Bell, etc. So I have a kind of simple question, but I wondered about Thomas Sordis's somatic modes of attention and whether that's a part of your questioning, because he's talking about, in the church, how that might impact on how your bodily attention, as well as Deirdre Sklar writes about this. Yeah, so has that come through with your research so far, or is that too simplified, that conception, Sordis's somatic modes of attention? Thank you.
If I speak to that question, thank you, Chantal, for your thoughts. I think that amongst somatic practitioners, there are differences. It's not a uniform field, to say first. But one thing that Jonathan and I stumbled upon is the priority of sensation that precedes and causes movement, and movement action being consequence or afterthought. And that also privileges the access to embodiment, putting choreographers as those disembodied minds that colonize other people's minds. I mean, I'm putting it deliberately in caricature terms. And why neuroscientific shift from input-output model that I just described towards motor action being inactive of perception was important for us is to understand the short-circuiting, the simultaneity, the coincidence, if you want, between sensation and action, or perception and movement. So if somatics have renewed our understanding of training in dance, because it has been extremely valuable. It is about self-affection and a lot of times about the visceral as this internal space of the body in which we feel, but sometimes we also project feelings. I believe that there's a lot of feigning going on, and that brings imagination into the picture. There is perhaps rigorous work where you can verify sensations that you have, and there's a lot of work that also deliberately describes itself as fiction, as somatic fiction, because of inability to prove whether the sensations are located in that part where we physiologically normally don't have a sensation of. If you feel your pancreas, you have a problem with pancreas. You don't feel it all the time. But that it makes dancers imagine what it means to issue movement out of pancreas is valid as a poetics, I would say. So to maybe conclude this answer is that for Jonathan and me, it has been hugely important to understand that there is not this unilateral causation between perception and action, that the two are entangled with each other, and that's how we are in the world. And that in fact, without action, we cannot have experiences. Our perceptions are in a way blind without possibility to enact them in the world, which has been proven by Alva Noe. I think that it's an old book from 2004, but Action and Perception is quite crucial in that sense.
Yves.
And maybe can I rebound on this? I want to go back to the question talked about attention as a skill. And it's this notion of skill, which we already sort of discussed, but maybe I wanted to go back to that, and especially what you said now about without action, there can be no experience or something. And for me, from my current interest in curiosity, I think we could say that we live in sort of a golden age of curiosity. Whatever you want to know, your libido scendi, you just either in the old days, Google, now AI, whatever, you have an immediate answer to whatever you want to know. So you say, oh, how can it be better for curiosity? Same thing, even if you talk about Alien, I mean, just watch Trump and he's just Alien every day. So I think curious things are out there. They come to you all the time. Now, my point is this apparently golden age of curiosity may very much be sort of a dark age of research, of curiosity as research, because I think curiosity is interesting insofar as it is an action. It is the actions that you have to do, make, perform, whatever you want to say, in order to go out of where you are, to try to find something to imagine something. You talked about imagination, to imagine and to maybe think something is possible that was out of your habit, out of your habitat, etc., etc. So I think this notion of skill, and this goes back to Stiegler, this goes back to a lot of people, Le Roy, all this tradition, thinking techniques as a form of this is these weird words of exosomatization. So you used to do things with your body. You had nails and you could slash things with your nails, and then you build a knife, and the knife can slash things, and you don't need to. I don't have nails. I couldn't slash anything with that because there are knives around. Now we tend to think of this as just again the nail and the knife. So these are two things, and why not trade? Okay, it's good to have knives. But I think if we think of skills, then it changes. It's not just exosomatization of functions, of tools, of whatever. It is de-skilling. And I know now there's a lot of talk about de-skilling because it's just become so blatant about AI, what AI does for us, to the point of just articulating thought. We thought, oh, articulating thought is always there in conversation, is always there in written form. And now, and I think they're wrong. I mean, I'm not technophobe, but I'm not in this, people say, oh, it's the end of the world. Just because I get old, it's going to be the end of the world. No, it's the end of my world, and the world's going to continue. And so I think a lot of the apocalyptic mood sort of annoys me because of that. And yet, thinking of what a skill is, involving precisely movement, action, attention, etc., curiosity, and how we effectively witness processes of very quick processes of de-skilling. And this in terms of, again, movement, I guess you would have a lot to say about what bodies can do. To me, dance is experimenting what bodies can do. And by this expansion, this curiosity about what bodies can do, it reveals how little my body does that. And this, I mean, that's more or less what my body does. We're all in, like in WALL-E, in this movie, where that's what we're going to end up doing with our body. So I see dance as precisely fighting against that decades-old de-skilling. And then we have to do the same thing, I think, about thinking. because we have machines that have replaced a lot of gestures over the last 2 centuries. And now we have machines that are about to be a substitute for mental moves and dancing with your spirit or with your mind. I think it's precisely what we need to do. So you're a model in this somatic sense, I think.
Stephanie, you just raised your hand, but there was a question before from Miranda Lawrence. So if it's all right, I'm just going to quickly go to them. We're running out of time, but maybe we just be brief. So I think this is probably addressed to you, Yves. And Miranda's question is, what is the difference between curiosity and imagination?
Ooh, good one. I don't know. That's a good one. Well, depends. There's so many different exceptions of imagination. So you can have a very broad way of thinking about imagination, which is just to get an image in your mind. Let's call it the mind, to have an image of your mind of something. So there are triggered imaginations when you see a movie. But usually when we think of imagination, I think maybe that's what you close your eyes and you imagine a human being with 3 legs. Okay, so I close my eyes, I imagine a human being with 3 legs. I think it's part of curiosity. Just like attention and curiosity, it would be absurd to say these are totally different things. And I'm just finished a book on curiosity in French, and I always do this in a triangle. And actually, if anybody's interested in English, with a friend of mine, Enrico Campo, we did a book called The Politics of Curiosity. That was 2 years old, The Politics of Curiosity. And in the introduction, we try to say, let's stop just thinking about attention versus distraction. One is good, one is bad. If you put a triangle with curiosity here, attention here and distraction there, and you try to locate things within that triangle, then it becomes so same.
You're breaking up, Yves.
Thing about. Oh. Can you?
You have to repeat it.
Sorry, I guess my Wi-Fi is not so stable.
Now it's back.
Yeah, apologies.
If you could just
back
repeat
again.
Yeah.
I was just saying about a triangle where instead of thinking, oh, either we're attentive or we're distracted, we see a continuity, and then in a triangle we have curiosity here, attention, distraction, and we try to locate whatever we talk about in this triangle. So I was saying this about the same thing for imagination. I don't think imagination is totally separate. It's part of curiosity, but still for me the difference is that imagination, again, that's an oversimplification, but it presupposes that you can close your eyes and find something alien, right? I think that's imagination. And I would be very skeptical about that, because that goes back to the studio. Just to be brief, I think when you close your eyes, most of what works within whatever your body or your mind is just recombining things that have already been there and have already been formatted, and you're very likely to just have something coming out which is just a slight recombination of something that was here. So on the one hand, I would say the studio is necessary. The private space in Flusser, the studio, it's necessary precisely to close the door and maybe close your eyes. And some recombination is necessary. But by itself, this work of imagination, of closing your eyes, I think it's very limited. And for me, the other side of this is the documentary, to have a documentary approach where you're very skeptical about fiction, because fiction is very limited. What people imagine, I think it's very limited. On the other hand, documenting things as they are and seeing things as they are in another way, I think it's much richer than just dreaming about something. But that's maybe a false opposition. So I would just say curiosity means you have to open your eyes. You have to look at what's there, but it's more interesting to look at what's there in looking for something which is not here now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it makes sense for imagination.
I think we could. You answered it also before. To me, it seems that imagination doesn't presuppose action, doesn't presuppose activating yourself in the world, while curiosity means going one step further beyond what is present.
Much better answer. Yeah, and much
shorter. No, I'm just summarizing what you said.
Yeah, thank you, Miranda, for that question. Stephanie and Yaniv, I'm so sorry because you both raised your hand and we've just completely run out of time. But at the same time, I think it's been worth all the time we've given to Yves and Bojana.
Yes, that they say their question. We won't answer, but to hear the question, I think, would be very interesting. Usually the questions are more interesting than the answers.
Stephanie, would you like to?
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much. And it was kind of more a comment, but I just wanted to share. I've been really sort of thinking also around listening to you both also as attention, something that extends into the environment and is actually collectively constituted, etc., how that plays out in institution and the sort of politics around attention and how institutions, for instance, govern those. So if I'm thinking around your example, Yves, earlier, around school and the social roles in school, of course, universities, we were talking about dance studies, etc., as well, and the politics going on there is like who gets kept their attention focused on certain tasks, who's involved in the attention of particular decision making, etc. And so I think that's sort of the other side. I'd be very curious to hear more about. But yeah, I'm leaving it as a comment and hand over to, I can't remember.
Yaniv, would you like to share?
Hello. Yeah, first I listened to the whole lecture while I was climbing, so I was finding it interesting by itself, but I'm much more concentrated when I do something active. And you were touching a bit with ADHD. I'm diagnosed as ADHD, and there is two words in ADHD. One is the disorder, and the word appear. It appears with the meeting point of a person with something else, or institute, or another person, or relationship, or something like that, and then the words float because there is some kind of like a expectation of this is how it needs to work. So actually the disorder word is only about who has the power to define this in a way. And everything that we speak about ADHD, also the things that you say, because it's a spectrum, we speak about the generalization of it, but actually the people in the edges of ADHD might need medication or might, it's a completely different ball game. And then I thought about the word deficit, that actually, for me, I really recognize that I don't have a deficit of attention. I have a bit too much of it, maybe, and it's for different things. And it doesn't go in a straight line, maybe. And if that takes me to another thing that we spoke about, skill, is that if I meet an institute, so mostly my skills are not being treated as skills, but as deficits. And then I have, that's the other problem. And it's true what you said, that if the society was constructed in a certain way, that would not be needed as medication or something like that. But the problem is that we are not. And then I find myself that if I need to sit with Bojana in one room for 1 hour, I do need Ritalin. And the other thing that I wanted to say, just to connect it to one more thing, is this kind of like the body as a moving out of sensory or out of sensation, that for me, this is the main tool that I use to anchor my attention, my floating attention, I will say. According to the action that I do, my attention is floating to different things. So it's much easier for me, for example, now to climb and to listen to you speak about it, although I might not remember because I didn't take notes, but taking notes will make my attention go to different places. That make any sense. So I just wanted to say it. I'm not sure I formalized the question, but it's a bit more like thinking about.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's great.
We have to stop now. Thank you so much, Yves and Bojana, for your clarity and generosity in this conversation. I just want to mention that for me, it's really important that we can have these cross-disciplinary exchanges, because I think for us in dance, it gives us a way to unpick or rethink or re-see our own understandings and positions. Just want to thank Kerry Frankson, who co-curates this series, and Heinrich Eskana, who was helping me to set up today. And thank you to DaRE for allowing this series to happen. So thank you very much for everybody that came and for your attention today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yves. Thank you,
Thank
Jonathan,
you.
and everyone there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.